That woke everybody up. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We're going to start off this evening this is September 4th, 2024. We're going to begin with the Schertz Capital Improvement Advisory Committee meeting. Call to order. Seat alternates. I think we have both of them with us this evening. Hearing of residents. Anybody? Nobody. Item number 4 is a public hearing. Hold a public hearing, consider and file the semi-annual report evaluating the progress of the city on achieving the capital improvements program and identifying any problems in implementing the plans or administering the capital recovery fees. Kathy?
Good evening, commissioners. So this first item, actually, we have the PowerPoint up here a little early, but so we have 2 items to talk about, and one is the semi-annual report, and this one is covering the period from October 1st, 2023 to March 31st, 2024. So I'm a broken record every time I point out how late we are with this, but recognize that all of the numbers on the report in the attachment and in the staff report are from that period of time. So I'm going to give you just a quick update on each one of the projects and where we are, and the update that I'm going to give you is kind of where we are today, although the numbers are from that previous period. So first, for water projects that are funded by impact fees, the Corbett ground storage tank, we're in the construction phase, of course. The tank itself, the structure of the tank is essentially complete, and contractors are working on the site now to run conduits for the electrical and the controls for the pumping station that goes along with the tank. Things are going well with the project. There is a delay for one of the pieces of electronic equipment that goes into the motor control center, so we will be somewhat delayed, but it's not a big problem for our system. This isn't a hugely time-sensitive project, and we do expect it to be done probably May or June of 25. Another project that we're working on with water that's impact fee funded is the Ware Seguin to Lower Seguin and Greytown to File loop lines. Those are essentially complete with design, and our consultant is working on easement acquisition. So those both do run across private property, one of them literally from Ware Seguin to Lower Seguin. Not within or adjacent to any right-of-way. The Greytown to File does go along I-10, but it needs to be in an easement outside the TxDOT right-of-way. So working with that to get with property owners, and hopefully we won't have to do eminent domain. Hopefully they'll be willing to work with us, and we'll be able to acquire the easements without too much difficulty. Also, we have expenses for the citywide water master plan and impact fee update study. This one, it's the same in water and wastewater, and that we'll talk more about in a few minutes. With sewer, our biggest project, of course, is the Woman Hollering Creek wastewater project, which is the long 30-inch gravity main, lift station, and force main over to the South CCMA plant. This project has been somewhat plagued with delays, supply chain issues. We're very close to completion on the project, but we've been having continued issues with one of the pumps that was delivered to the site. I think we're on the 4th time that we're having to pull it out to make some fixes to it, have it repainted. We do have the vendor's word that if this time doesn't take care of it, we're getting a whole new pump. It's been very frustrating, but we are very close to the end on that. So this will be the first wastewater that'll go to the new CCMA plant, and we're working with them closely to coordinate that startup of that plant. For roadway, we haven't used a lot of the roadway impact fees that we've collected, but we did, as usual, have the annual partial reimbursement for the Rips Chrysler extension that was constructed by a developer, and we pay 30% of what we collect in that service area each year until we have paid back the total amount. of the reimbursement. So this period, we reimbursed a little over 57,000. We still have about 148,000 remaining. So a few more years and we should have that paid off. And then we've got the actual accounting reports that Mr. Walters put together. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight, but they're in the same format, same type of information that you've seen for years. So, be happy to answer any questions you have, or this one requires that you recommend that council approve or accept the report.
Okay, let me ask, so are we going to do, are there individual reports or is it one? So what I'm asking, because it's a public hearing, so
Right.
Are you done with the reports? Or
Yes.
okay.
Yes, we went through the water, the wastewater,
Okay.
and the roadway.
All right. So, public hearing. It is 6:06 p.m. Anyone wishing to address the commission on this subject is welcome to step forward. I see no one. Okay, it is still 6:06 p.m. and public input is closed. Commissioners, anybody have any questions or comments on this report?
I have one.
All right, go ahead.
The piece about hopefully not having to enforce the eminent domain. Have you already let them know about the situation, the people, the residents? Yeah, so they're aware.
Yes, so the first thing that happens is we request right of entry to their property so that we can do surveys and observation of what's there, look at any environmental constraints, that sort of thing. And at that time, they're also told that there's a possibility that we're going to need an easement across their property. There's a whole process that has to be met, including providing them with the landowner's Bill of Rights, and let them know that, you know, we intend to also perform an appraisal. And so they do need to sign the right of entry, and we make sure that they're aware of what the situation is. And then we work through the process.
So when will you know, like, when does that actually get discussed?
So I would hope within the next couple of months. I did see something that I guess one of the properties may be somewhat problematic, in which case fortunately, the route that we're taking is fairly wide open. It's farm areas, and we try to set the alignment so that it runs along property lines, so it doesn't, you know, bisect someone's property and render it less desirable because it's got an encumbrance going through the middle of it. So we're still looking at maybe which parcels might be more favorable in that respect, but we'll get a better feel from our consultant fairly soon.
I appreciate it.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Richard.
Hi, Kathy. The project to link the tank that's near Denot to Live Oak, is that on this plan anywhere?
It is not. That project has been on hold while we work through some issues with some HOAs that have some major heartburn with the route that we discussed there. We're also looking at some alternatives, perhaps hydraulically with the CIP and the new master plan that we have. We found through that process that likely we still do need that transmission main, but I think we've shifted it off to approximately fiscal year 26, I think, to move further forward with that.
So it's in the CIP?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I just want to say again how well that partnership, that private whatever, where we funded our part of Rips Crosser. I use it a lot. Fortunately, not a lot of other people use it yet, but I certainly do, and it's a great example of what the city can do, and hopefully we may see some more of that in the future. Do we approve this or recommend it? Recommending. Okay, so this is I need a motion recommending approval, or I guess disapproval, of this report to City Council.
I'll recommend approval of this report.
I'm sorry, what was that, Daniel?
I recommend approval.
Approval, okay.
Sorry.
I'll second.
Who was that?
Brian.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to recommend approval of the capital improvement program report we heard this evening, to recommend approval to City Council. Any further discussion? Okay, the electronic voting is not set up for CI for this meeting, so I need a voice vote. If we just, all those in favor of, say aye or nay, start at that end.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that makes 7 ayes and none opposed. That motion passes. Thank you. Item number 5 is workshop and discussion. 5A, workshop and presentation on water and wastewater capital recovery fees, otherwise known as impact fees. Kathy?
Yes. So now we'll go back to the beginning. We were talking a little bit, that report is what we bring twice a year to go over how we're spending the funds. And every so often, by statute, 5 years, but quite often we don't meet that. It's been quite a while. We evaluate the impact fees and make updates to them. So it's taken us quite a while to get through this update. It's a wholesale relook at things, and we started right about when COVID hit. So we've really struggled to keep up with development. Is happening very, very quickly, but you have to have a baseline to start with and project from there, and that's been a real struggle, and we're constantly telling our consultant, we need to update this, we need to update this. They're like, well, we can't just continue to update, we'll study this forever. So in any case, we're finally getting there, and so we thought, since we've got some new folks who haven't been through one of these either updates or several years ago when we adopted the roadway impact fee program for the first time, thought we'd kind of go back and do an impact fee 101 for everybody and sort of set the stage for what's going to come in the next couple months that that you guys will play an important role in. So, paying for water and wastewater infrastructure. So the rates are, oh, wait a minute, I apologize. I'm out of order, but we'll flip around, thanks. It's kind of a last minute thing. So impact fees, capital recovery fees, they're authorized by the state of Texas. In 1987 was the original legislature that authorized them, and they're codified in the local government code as chapter 395. The legislation authorizes cities to collect fees from new development to fund new construction or expansion of capital improvements, including water, wastewater, drainage, and roadway facilities. So here in the city of Schertz, we have water impact fees, wastewater impact fees, and roadway impact fees. We don't have drainage. That's not super common yet. In fact, we were one of the first communities to adopt roadway impact fees, but water and wastewater have been around for a while. So what impact fees are, they're a one-time fee that's paid by development to pay for or reimburse the cost of the infrastructure that benefits the development. It's not a tax that's paid by property owners, and it doesn't affect the rates that customers pay. So it doesn't affect folks, existing customers' water bills or wastewater bills. Let me go back and go over this one so we don't forget it. So just want to make this point. So in order to build all of the water and wastewater infrastructure that's needed to serve the community, the funding can come from a variety of sources. So one is, and the primary source are the rates paid by the customers. The city occasionally has to pitch in, so that comes from the property tax that's collected. The Economic Development Corporation, particularly lately, is funding some fairly substantial infrastructure projects. They did Tri-County Parkway, which included some wastewater line upsize. They're funding Lookout Road, which is going to have a wastewater line upsize. And they're also participating, I believe, in the Main Street project, which will have new water and wastewater infrastructure also. Grants, occasionally, the ground storage tank, the Corbett ground storage tank that impact fees are paying for, a portion of that, $2.5 million, I believe, is being funded by a grant. But the other big funding source is new development. So it's you know, someone comes in, builds an apartment complex, and they need more infrastructure to serve water and wastewater to that apartment complex, so that they pay an impact fee to help with that infrastructure construction. Okay, now we'll get back on track. Okay, so the maximum fee amount to be paid is assessed or essentially locked in at the time of plat recordation of a property. City Council, with the recommendation from the CIAC, sets the actual rate to be charged. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then the fees are actually charged at the time of building permit. So if a subdivision is platted, it might be platted 1 year, and there may be some vacant lots for residential construction that don't get built on for 5 years, 10 years, depending on how the economy's doing. And the fees are again, not charged until those building permits are pulled. So the steps to either establish or, in this case, update the impact fees include land use and growth assumption adoption, the development of capital improvements plan, calculation of the maximum fees, the setting of the actual fees to be assessed, and adoption of the ordinance. So we'll go through each one of those steps. So with the land use and growth assumptions, the land use assumptions are based on the comprehensive plan, zoning, population projections is really, really biggie, planned and existing developments, both residential and commercial, and of course, all of this is done with the water and wastewater CCNs in mind. So the CCNs, the certificates of convenience and necessity, basically are set by the Public Utility Commission to establish the service area where the utility provider is certified to serve. So if you look on this, and this exhibit isn't anything for you to really pay attention to what it is, it's just to make the slide a little more interesting. But you can see the sort of the thick blue line, so that represents the water CCN of the city of Schertz. So everything within that, the city of Schertz has the obligation to serve. Down here in the southern part of Schertz, for example, actually Green Valley Special Utility District has the CCN for water and wastewater in this little area known fondly as the wedge. You don't need to worry about that. That's just what that little area is called. So we have to keep in mind that we're working within our CCN. The next step is developing the capital improvements plan. So in order to do this, and in this case, we did something that first time since I've been here, and I know that we have had water and wastewater models in the past, but they haven't really been maintained, and so it's kind of an exciting project that we've been through, and that's developing the existing system water and wastewater models. So literally, we've got a software program that integrates with our GIS system, and it has every water line, every wastewater line. They're two separate models, but it's got all of our pumps and lift stations and elevated storage tanks in each of the models that can replicate or sort of represent the way our system works. And then, so that model can be used for a number of different things, but in this case, we applied the projected development as far as the location of expected development, demand, the number of residential units or commercial development, and the timing of when we expect that development to occur, broken down into 3 categories for this assessment. In the near term, which are projects that are either underway now or we're planning to do them soon. 2030, when we started the project, that was our 10-year planning window, 2030. We're already eating into that, but also 2050. So we applied the projected development to those models, and then from that, we can determine and identify projects that are needed in order to meet the demand of that expected growth. Also, I wanted to note that the master plans that are coming out of this, and we sort of use those terms interchangeably, master plan, capital improvement plan. The capital improvement plan that you all are going to sort of look into and come to a consensus if you feel that it's appropriately developed and recommend acceptance to City Council. Technically, what you're looking at there are impact fee eligible projects. So those are projects that are identified to be needed because of the growth projections that were put into the model. Now, what we've also done is we've looked at projects that are needed to improve system operation, perhaps because we feel that maybe we've got a neighborhood and it's got 6-inch water mains. It's not meeting fire flow demands of current standards. So we need to upgrade those to 8-inch lines. That's not necessarily impact fee eligible because it's not serving any new development, but it's still part of the master plan and it's part of the city's overall capital improvement plan. So it's a little bit tricky there, but what you're going to be recommending acceptance of is the capital improvement plan for the capital recovery program. So just a little nuance there, but also want to make sure that you all recognize that we are going to use the impact fee money collected for impact fee eligible projects, not just any capital improvement project. Okay, so we've come up with these, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but in next month, likely, we'll have you guys together again, and our consultant will come and actually present you with the land use assumptions and the capital improvement plans for this update of the program. So what I'm doing now is just kind of giving you a hypothetical, this is kind of the way this works. So after we've got all those projects identified, we estimate the cost for each one of them and also apply inflation factors for those that are expected to occur in 2030 or 2050. We look particularly at the cost of the near term and the 2030 impact fee eligible projects. Now we do have to subtract out of that. Now this one is a tricky one and I'm hoping you don't have any in-depth questions about it because I'll struggle to answer it. There'll be a financial analysis done. We need to subtract the portion of ad valorem tax revenues generated by the improvements over the program period. So basically when the city pays down on debt that has been used to build some of these improvements, we can't double dip, so we can't get the development to pay and taxes to pay for the same thing. So there's an amount that gets subtracted. Chapter 395 does allow for 2 options. We can either do that calculation, subtract that amount from the total, or we can just cut the expense of the capital improvement program by 50% and call it good. With the roadway one, we did in fact have the calculation done and subtracted that out. And what it does is it will generally give us a higher maximum assessable amount, which will get closer to us actually being able to capture the dollars needed to construct the infrastructure. But in some cases, it's better just to take 50% and run with that. But we'll have more particulars for you on that coming up. So then you take that cost of this program, and it's the 10-year window that we're looking at. Of course, we're slightly abbreviated because we're so far into the 10-year window. But we take that cost and we, minus the tax stuff that we have to take out, and we divide it by the number of LUEs that we expect to develop during that same period, and that gives us the maximum rate that is allowed to be charged per LUE once it's adopted for anything that's platted within the time frame of when the ordinance is adopted in the new rate and the next time we do an update. An LUE, I threw that in there. You've probably heard that thrown around just to make sure that everybody remembers it's a living unit equivalent. If you are hanging around in different municipalities, some of them go by EDUs instead, equivalent dwelling unit. It's the same thing. Living unit equivalent is the amount of water or wastewater used by a single family residence. So that's kind of like the baseline. So apartment units, generally there's a factor. So an apartment unit generates like a 0.6 LUEs. I may have that number wrong. I'm just using it to illustrate. Thinking an apartment dwelling the folks there won't usually use quite as much water as a detached single family residence. And then commercial use is also, and it's generally based, the actual charge is going to be based on the size of the water meter that's used. A bigger water meter, you can get more water through it, so we expect, since they need the capacity to use all that water, that's what it's generally based on. So the next step, set the fees to be assessed. So this is the tough part. The first part's probably tougher for staff and our consultant. Setting the fee to be assessed is the tough part for the policymakers, and that's you guys making an advice to City Council. So you need to consider the calculated fees and make a recommendation, and you'll actually have to provide a written recommendation. Now, staff will write the letter, but the chair will need to sign it. But some of the things that you'll consider is, of course, there'll be the maximum assessable rate established, and you'll have to accept that as part of your recommendation. And then you may choose to recommend any rate equal to or less than the maximum assessable. And remember, you'll have two. You'll have water and you'll have wastewater. So hypothetically speaking, we say, okay, the maximum assessable rate is calculated and it's $10,000 for one living unit equivalent. And you may think, that's crazy, $10,000. I'm making these numbers up, everybody, please remember that. Town C over here only charges $5,000. Town B over here only charges $7,000. We can't charge $10,000. What would be more realistic? Okay, we recommend that council decides to charge $8,000. It's still, so those kinds of conversations are kind of what you'll have, and staff will work to guide that conversation. But you can't ever say, well, 7,000, or I'm sorry, 10,000 isn't enough. We want to do 11,000. Can't do that. The maximum assessable is a legal number that can't be gone over. Something else you might consider is a gradual phase-in. This is something that was done with the roadway impact fee. That was a little different situation because it was a brand new fee, and there was concern about how it would impact, no pun intended, it's hard not to use that word, how it would influence development coming here, particularly with the commercial development, that maybe if we set it too high, it would stifle some commercial growth. That was a concern. Not sure that it really had that reaction. But there was conversation during the roadway impact fee development, and there was a decision that the rates would be set fairly low for commercial development, not so low for residential development, but that each year over I think it took 3 years to completely phase in till we got up to, and currently I believe that residential customers, or residential developers, sorry, are paying the maximum assessable rate for roadway impact fees. Commercial are paying way less, significantly less. I think $1,000 per unit. It's a whole nother concept. It's not per house, but per unit is the maximum, and commercial is paying, I think, $175 per unit for roadway. That's just, I'm just pointing that out to let you know how significantly different residential and commercial were treated for the roadway. And there was science behind that, but I'm sorry, there wasn't science behind that. There was strategy behind that. And so also I'll throw in the fact that we're going to turn around and we're going to need to start looking at updating the roadway fee fairly soon too. So we'll get you guys talking all your impact fee stuff, and we'll be regulars. Okay, so we talked about a phase in of like over 3 years. Okay, so the first year maybe it was 700, the next year 900, and then 1,000 for residential, for example. We also consider a grace period. We don't just say if a plat's recorded tomorrow, they're on the higher rate. We allow a grace period for folks for developers in particular, to include these rates in their estimates when they're looking to do a project, and they do a pro forma to find out if they can, make the appropriate profit. They kind of need to know what they're getting into with fees, and some of these fees are fairly sizable. So we do usually give, whatever that seems to be appropriate, whether that's a 3-month or a 2-month or what have you. So those are kind of some of the things that you'll be sort of addressing in the next month or so. And then, like I said, you'll have to make a written recommendation of that to council. Adopting the ordinance, that's when council steps in. They're going to hold a public hearing to talk about and accept the updated land use assumptions, capital improvement plans, maximum accessible rate, and then they'll have to have that same conversation about the current rate and any phase-in or grace periods, and they may choose to take your recommendation, or they may go a different direction. And then they'll actually adopt an update to the water and wastewater capital recovery program and ordinance. So we have a tentative schedule to work this through, and there are very specific steps that need to be taken per the local government code with particular timing. For example, once the city receives final documents from our consultant, and that is expected on September 28th, the city has 60 days to, and this is so convoluted, but I have to imagine there was a reason when this was being developed back in 1987. The city has 60 days for council to pass a resolution setting a public hearing date for the update of these fees. So we get the final documents, and we're not going to wait up to 60 days. We're going to go ahead and get on a council agenda, and we're going to set the date, I apologize, council will set the date for a public hearing. That will likely happen October 15th. I did say tentative schedule, things happen, so don't, put this in your calendar yet, but this is hopefully the way it'll work out. We do need to provide notice of the public hearing in the newspaper, of course, before November 3rd. It's 30 days before the actual public hearing. CIAC, hearing and consideration of the program amendments. We're looking at requesting that you all get together for a special meeting October 16th, and then we're leaving space for the November 6th meeting. That's a regularly scheduled meeting for P&Z. In the event that it's just too much material to get through, lots of questions during the October 16th meeting, and or you just need more time to discuss. So we wanted to leave enough time for that. We also plan to present this to EDC and request their input. That's not statutorily required, but we feel that's a good way to help inform both you and also council. We'll have to provide the written comments from CIAC before November 28th. That is at least 5 days before the public hearing. But in reality, likely that will be taken care of at the tail end of either October 16th, most likely November 6th. So maybe November 7th, we'll have a draft of that after your meeting, and we'll get that taken care of. But it statutorily has to be done before November 28th. We'll go to City Council with a workshop on November 19th, and then have a public hearing and first reading of the ordinance on December 3rd, which allows time, if a second reading is necessary, December 17th. The only reason that that's asterisked with the if needed, I think there is a charter amendment that is being proposed that will eliminate the need for a second reading of all ordinances, so could save some time there, but I don't know if that will go through in time for this. So the updates may be adopted as early as December 3rd. So that's what we're looking toward. So any questions on this really exciting stuff?
Well, it's very complicated, and having been through it, some of us have been through it before, particularly with the roadway impact fees. It's not a simple thing, but I think you did a good job of explaining the basics to us. And but so this next one coming up will just be water and wastewater, won't include roadway as on their own timetable. Okay. Anyone have any questions? Roger?
So comment, I did notice that the October 16th proposed date is the starting date of the APA workshop, so I don't know who's going to be going to that, but
Oh, okay.
may or may not. It is right?
Yes.
Okay. All
And
right.
thank you. I didn't think of that. I didn't think of that either.
Okay. And so I guess I'm going to look at Emily. When you need to call a special meeting, how does that work as far as checking with schedules and? Call it, okay. So other than the November 6th is a normal P&Z meeting, so do you normally call even for those to make sure that, okay. Because generally there's not something else scheduled for those same nights. So, but yes, so you'll be reached out to by the planning staff to make sure that it's a convenient time for a special meeting.
Is there a reason you don't want to do it at the October Commission P&Z meeting? Not quite ready yet, or?
Exactly. So we expect to get the final QA/QC documents from our consultant September 28th. So that's not really very much time, although we've seen just about everything, but we haven't seen the final document, and we actually haven't yet seen the final calculation. And right, so that's the primary reason.
Okay.
To give a little bit more time for preparation. We want to make sure that we understand it before we lay it on you.
Right. Anyone else? Richard?
Yeah, so according to the schedule you have up right now, when was your expectation of an approval from planning and zoning? On the 16th or the 6th?
November 6th, most likely?
Okay. But it's statutorily, it has to be November 28th.
So the written comments and recommendation, the letter needs to be provided to council by the 28th.
Okay.
But there's really no, I mean, once you've had your meeting and discussed it and come with your recommendations, there aren't going to be changes to that between that and the 28th.
Yes, I'm assuming whether it's, whether we do the special meeting or the meeting on November 6th, we'll come up with our recommendations and our comments. And then staff will then draft that letter for me to sign to go. So it's just, once we make our recommendations, let's just assume that we finalize our recommendations on the 6th of November, then we're done with it. And so somewhere between then and somewhere after that and before the 28th, staff has to put that letter together for me to sign to give to city council.
Correct.
Right?
And it also allows a little bit of flex in the event that you still are not able to come to a consensus recommendation. We could perhaps call another special meeting if necessary and still have time for the November 28th deadline.
You mentioned comparative numbers from other municipalities. Have you set that area yet? Sometimes we get examples from Dallas and Fort Worth area. I'm not interested in that.
Right.
I don't think
Understood.
we don't need to go past Buda, Hayes, or any of that area.
Right, and I think there have been a number of communities that have gone up significantly in the last year or couple years, and so those in particular, we're having those pulled. And it's, basically, Cibolo, obviously, we always look at what they're doing. Seguin recently increased. I think NBU increased.
NBU is going to increase again, so
Okay.
real soon.
Internally, they move faster than we do, I guess. But yes, we recognize that we need to really look at, I hate to call it competition, but for lack of a better term, the communities where, if people are looking to develop, if it's not here, where is it? So it's not necessarily an aspirational thing. It's a reality.
I just wanted to understand the fee you said is typically lower for commercial roadway fees?
So that's what was done for the roadway impact fee.
Okay.
Like I say, there was a big concern that and again, I mentioned that Schertz was one of the early adopters of roadway impact fees. So there are communities close to us that didn't have a roadway impact fee at all. Okay. And there was a big concern that if we made the fee too high, it would literally drive off commercial development,
okay,
which of course is a huge problem for us. And I think another thought about the residential was that we're getting tons of residential, and there was not an expectation that that was going to be cut back at all. And residential generally is more of a burden on the city than commercial from a financial standpoint. I'm only talking about financial. They don't, their tax dollars aren't as significant as what it takes to support them, if that makes sense. So those were some of the conversations that we had. Now, I'm not aware that there's been any conversation or I don't believe ever in the history of the water and wastewater impact fees here in Schertz where they split and came up with different rates for residential versus commercial. With water and wastewater, it's generally been based on meter size. Doesn't really matter what you're using the water for. So have to have that conversation. And so between our consultant, Brian James, we'll have some some input and some guidance on where you might think of going in that direction.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you, Kathy. Very informative.
Thank you.
And thanks for the heads up on the need for the special meeting. I made note of that. So thanks again. All right. There being no further business, the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee meeting is adjourned at 6:45 p.m. And Brian, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. All right. It is, does anybody need a quick break? I didn't plan, no? Okay, all right. So it is 8:45, and I will call the September 4th, 2024 regular meeting of the Schertz Planning and Zoning Commission to order. And once again, item number 2 is the seat alternates. We have the 2 of them joining us this evening. Item 3, hearing of residents. No one? No emails or anything like that either, right? Okay. Okay, item number 4 is our consent agenda. We have a single item on there. Item 4A are the minutes from the August 7th, 2024 regular meeting. There is no discussion on consent agenda items. Does this item need to be pulled for discussion? Commissioners? All right, seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Was Mr. Wallace, right? Okay. I have a second?
Second.
Way down at the other end. All right. So I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any further well, there is no discussion, so please record your vote. All right, I see 6 votes. Can you publish that, please? We have 6 ayes, none opposed. That motion passes. Thank you. Item number 5, public hearings. Looks like we have 3 of those this evening. And a huge crowd tonight, so I'm not even going to read the whole, you all know how it works. We all know how it works. Okay, so item 5A, PLUDC 2024-0167, conduct a public hearing, workshop, and discussion, and possible action to make a recommendation on amendments to Part 3 of the Schertz Code of Ordinances, Unified Development Code, UDC, to Article 5, Section 21.5.9, special districts, and Article 9, Section 21.9.3, lots, Section 21.9.8, screening and fencing, Section 21.9.9, tree preservation and mitigation, Section 21.9.12, site plan process, and Article 16, definitions. Floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. PLUDC 2024-0167, proposed UDC amendments, UDC cleanup for Article 5, Article 9, and Article 16, Daisy Marquez, Planner. So some background, as per UDC Section 2147, from time to time, City Council on its own motion or at the recommendation of City staff, they can make amendments, change or modify any portion of the UDC to establish or maintain sound and stable development. Staff also periodically reviews the development process to make improvements, which includes reviewing the UDC for clarity and cohesion. The proposed UDC amendments, which were initiated by the Planning Division, are meant to clarify the intent of the UDC and clean up lingering language removed from previous amendments. So the proposed UDC amendments include modifications to the following articles and sections. So Article 5, which is zoning, Section 2159, special districts, to remove agricultural conservation plan development district, mixed-use planned development district, and design overlay district. Article 9, Section 2193 lots, to remove the requirement to show building setbacks on plats. Section 2198, screening and fencing, to modify the prohibited materials to include a clarification. Section 2199, tree preservation and mitigation, to remove tables that are no longer in the UDC and to modify the exempted trees table. And Article 9, Section 21912, the site plan process, to remove applications that require an approved site plan. And Article 16, definitions, to add clarification to the mixed-use self-storage definition. So I'm going to start with the UDC Section 2147D, the criteria for approval. One, the proposed amendment promotes the health, safety, or general welfare of the city and safe, orderly, and efficient and helpful development of the city. So staff proposes UDC amendments from time to time to proactively better the UDC that governs the development within the city of Schertz. The proposed amendments are necessary for consistency with changes already made to the UDC, and additionally, they provide clarification on sections of the UDC sections used by multiple departments. This usually happens because we use it every day with applications. We interpret it every day. We get calls asking for interpretations. People complain about it every day to us, so we get rather familiar with it. The proposed amendments to Article 9, Section 2199 add invasive tree species to the exempt tree table that are not desirable and are classified as invasive to our area. The proposed amendments have been reviewed by the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Director, and there are no objections to the amendments. And we actually had the pleasure to meet with a representative of the Texas A&M Forest Service staff to discuss the proposed additional exempt tree species. And he spoke with us about our list, and he agreed with us, and it was actually a great pleasure to learn about the tree species that we added to our list. So it was a really great pleasure to speak with them. And two, an amendment to the text is consistent with the policies of the UDC and the city. The proposed amendments are meant to clean up lingering UDC language that has remained and to clarify the intent of the UDC. Three, any proposed amendment is consistent with the goals and objectives of the UDC of the city. The proposed UDC amendments are consistent with the goals and objectives of this UDC and the city, as they are meant to help keep the UDC consistent with previously approved amendments. The operational values of the city include being proactive and service-oriented, and by being proactive with the proposed UDC amendments, staff can provide a better experience within the development process. And four, other criteria which at the discretion of the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council are deemed relevant and important in the consideration of the amendment. Staff has ensured all UDC requirements have been met for the proposed UDC amendments, and at this time have not received special considerations from the Planning and Zoning Commission or City Council. So I'm just going to go through the amendments one by one and just going through the run lines, kind of just talking through the thought process of these very minor in comparison to what Samuel has kind of done in comparison to what I'm showing you today. But kind of just showing you what's going on. So for 2193 lots, it's kind of just scaling back down the language. In Article 16, it's definitions. It's clearly defined what a building setback is. So we wanted to just clear that definition from this section as it was just redundant to have it here. We also don't require building setbacks on plats anymore. We removed that from our checklist, and we don't want that shown on residential plats or commercial plats anymore, since zoning can be really changed at any point if it's approved or not. So we wanted that removed from this section as people were kind of confusing that. So we wanted just to clarify that and remove that from this section. And then 2198, screening and fencing. So this is from the residential portion. We moved the chain link and similar woven wire mesh to the first portion for the materials permitted, and then we just clarified, provided no screening is attached. We spoke with neighborhood services and with other staff, and we found that people were getting creative with their chain link fencing, and we just wanted to make it clear that we didn't want people to add screening to their chain link fencing, just to make sure that it was clear that this is what we wanted the UDC, and the chain link fence is just chain link fence. This is what we wanted it to be. This is just the material that it needs to be. Nothing on it, pure in its form. And then B, prohibited materials, we just wanted to make it match with the current and most recent UDC amendments that Emily just did for Article 7 non-conforming to match the most recent agricultural operations. So we cleaned up language there, so it just matches the agricultural operations language. And then we did the same in the commercial portion, and then in Section 3, you can just see that we cleaned up the formatting, just so that this UDC portion is just more easily read. And then again, another portion of screening and fencing, we just matched it again to Article 7 non-conforming, so that it just matches the agricultural operations UDC amendment. And then getting into the tree preservation and mitigation 2199, at some point, there was a major overhaul of this UDC section, and subsection F, 2197F, that table no longer exists, and it's been causing problems when it came to the site plan process, because a lot of people were looking for that table, and they would go, where's the undesirable list? Where's the undesirable list? And me only being here for a year, I'd go, well, I don't know where the undesirable list is. There's an exempt tree list. And if the tree is not clearly listed in the exempted tree list, they have to pay for the tree. And they'd go, well, that tree's ugly. I don't want to pay for that tree. So then it'd become a conversation between me and the director of parks fighting over trees and inches and DBHs. So it just becomes a fight when it doesn't have to be. So then it just turned into a conversation of, okay, let's just dive into this and see what trees do people actually need to pay for, and why are we making people pay for invasive species when this development process doesn't have to be, a fight over paying over a bush, versus let's actually put some trees in and that we actually care for in the city of Schertz. And then again, the tree table. And then in D, just cleaning up again some tables that are no longer within this UDC section. And then in F, again, just cleaning up some sections that are no longer there. In H, just clarifying again some more sections. 2, again, just clarifying some sections that were moved around with some amendments. And then 21912, with the SUP process being amended, it was never cleaned up the site plan process section where it required a site plan with the SUP process. So we're cleaning this up now where it required a site plan with the PDD or SUP. So we're just cleaning that up now. And then we never required a pre-application conference for a site plan process. And then again, more cleanup. And then here, just more cleanup again. We removed the language of ordinary. We clarified with our chief building official to make sure it didn't mean anything in the International Building Code, and he reassured us that it wasn't anything extraordinary, it didn't mean anything in particular to them. And then again, this is just a sneak peek to what Mr. Haas is bringing you up next, but a removal of the safe, orderly, efficient, and helpful development of the city. This is going to be consistent with what's coming up next. And then F, some more cleanup with things that are not consistent with what is in the UDC anymore. And then Article 16 definitions, we were already getting some questions with what the minimum of 45 feet and what that 45 feet what it was meant for. So we just really wanted to get in on that early and clarify that it was for a minimum of 45 feet in height. We wanted to prevent any questions in the future, and we wanted to make it clear that these buildings had to be a minimum of 45 feet in height for a mixed-use self-storage building. And then again, these proposed UDC amendments promote consistency throughout the UDC and provide additional clarity in the development process. Staff recommends approval of PL UDC 2024-0176 and amendments to Part 3 of the Schertz Code of Ordinances, UDC Article 5, Section 2159 Special Districts, Article 9, Section 2193 Lots, Section 2198 Screening and Fencing, Section 2199 Tree Preservation and Mitigation, Section 21912 Site Plan Process, and Article 16 Definitions. Any comments and questions? And yeah, we don't have a crowd.
All right, Daisy, thank you. This is a public hearing. It is 7 p.m. At this time, I'll open the floor for anyone wishing to address the commission on this topic. Big stampede, right? I'm just watching the clock, let it tick over one. All right, it is 7:01 p.m. and hearing no interest, the public input is closed. Commissioners, comments, questions? Yeah, all right, go ahead.
Daisy, on the chain link fencing, the screening on a chain link fence, does that include vines and vegetation?
No. Excuse me. I think I took that personal. No, there's a section that explicitly allows that. Oh my God.
Here, have some water.
No, I have water.
Get you some.
What about the crossvine?
Hmm?
The crossvine is all.
Yeah.
Vines are okay. The intent of that section is something that's people call it like sniper cloth.
Yeah,
That's the
or
intent of
Venetian
that.
blind
Or
stuff and things like that.
metal
Yeah,
are attached to chain link. That's the loophole that people have been using. Yeah.
vines are very sensitive to you. Another question, I didn't find where it was covered before, but on barbed wire, are we including security fences in that? I think there's an exception for utilities somewhere.
Yeah, there's a section later on that says Public Works could use barbed wire and all
Okay.
of that.
But it's not in what we were looking at tonight, right? It's someplace else. Okay.
Yeah. There you go, say it again.
So I was just going to say that the clarification was that it's not just for City of Schertz public works facilities, but any public water, wastewater
Right.
facility can use that exemption. It does allow for chain link if it's, barbed wire security fencing, if other matters are also done as well. But that's in a different section. We're not proposing to change that.
Good. Thank you.
Just a little critique on your PowerPoint here. It pulls all of this out of context, okay, and it makes it a little difficult. The memo, the format that the staff memo was written in, it was a little easier to where you had what it is now and what you want to change. It was right there, so it was easy for us to see. So fence material. What about these, and this is a trade name, but it's the only thing I know how to call it. I call it fenccrete, okay? And I don't, where does that fit in your materials? But it's not, it's concrete. It's that poured concrete, you see it around, yeah.
So I would say we have historically always considered fenccrete, which is the actual brand
Right.
fenccrete,
Yeah.
as a masonry screening material. So I could agree, it's not technically stone or brick, but it is traditionally used in private fence construction,
Okay.
so it would still be permitted.
Okay. And then the question of barbed wire and agriculture is right there in front of me. Okay, thank you. And just again, as a clarification on your trees, that table those are the ones that we don't worry about. Those are the trash trees.
Correct, sir.
Okay,
They do not have to pay for those.
gotcha. Anybody else?
What if you wanted to use chicken wire around your shrubs to keep animals from eating it? Could you not do that?
We would look at it differently, or if you're trying to fence using chicken wire between you and Mr. Outlaw's property, that is where
Okay.
this really comes in. But if you want to build a little small screening around a shrub you have in your backyard, you're not really going to pull a fence permit for that, right? It's
Yeah, I would think that something like, putting around a tree or a shrub to protect against the deer would probably be outside the intent or the scope of the UDC.
Okay. All right, thanks.
I'm not sure it's relevant, but I find it really interesting that you brought Texas A&M into it, and I was curious how you guys went about doing that.
I just really care about trees, and Sam had contacted this man either way, and I was just invited to the table, and I just really care about trees.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
They have a really good forestry department,
yeah, it worked out really.
excellent forestry department.
It worked out really well. Sam was already meeting with him for another matter, and it was like, hey, we're working on this UDC amendment. Let's get his take on it. He's the expert here, so it just kind of everything fell in place.
Anyone else? All right, this is a recommendation to City Council to either approve, deny, or approve with conditions. If someone would like to make a motion.
Make a motion to recommend approval of PL UDC 2024-0167.
Second.
And a second. All right, I have a motion and a second to recommend approval of PL UDC 2024-0167 to City Council. Any further discussion? If not, please record your votes. All right, I have 6 votes. You publish that, please. I have 6 ayes and none opposed. That motion passes. Thank you. Item 5B, PLUDC 2024-0195, conduct a public hearing, workshop, and discussion, and possible action to make a recommendation on amendments to Part 3 of the Schertz Code of Ordinances, Unified Development Code, UDC, to Article 4, Procedures and Applications, and Article 5, Zoning Districts. Sam?
Thank you, Commissioner. PLUDC 2024-0195, UDC amendments to Article 4 and Article 5, Samuel Haas, Senior Planner. So as you guys are probably familiar by now, we have these criteria for approval that we list off every time that we're doing our analysis for all our various applications. They're pretty, they're consistent throughout the UDC. We have them for various different applications, but kind of looking at our changes in practice and the way that we've updated our UDC, and we also looked at some target city research. We thought that there are certain sections that could use a little updating and frankly a little streamlining. So The changes that we're proposing here today are to the sections for the comprehensive land plan amendments, the UDC amendments, zone changes, and specific use permits. In the zone change specifically, we're proposing to change a little bit of language too, just to make things simple and clear. So we'll start, I have these tables here. We'll go through it one by one. What you see on the left side is what's currently in the code. When you see a strike through, we're proposing to actually eliminate that language. And when you see red on the right side, which is what's proposed, that is language that is going to be added in. So we'll go through these one by one. In the current text, you see this proposed amendment promotes health, safety, or general welfare of the city and the safe, orderly, efficient, and healthful development of the city. Frankly, it seems a bit redundant to ask for health and safety and safe and healthful development. It's also a bit of a mouthful. Staff is proposing to just kind of strike that. The intent of that sentence is perfectly done in the first part of it. In number 2, we are striking some of that language because it seems a bit intuitive already, or obvious, if you will. Also, if you see down here on number 4, we're eliminating that, and we're actually combining it. So we're combining 2 and 4, and we're basically saying an amendment to the text consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the comp plan. Number 3, essentially just striking a little bit of language to make that a little less redundant. And then number 4, we're leaving in place. And number 5, we've essentially said, we've changed the word criteria to avoid confusion, as this section is called criteria for approval. That's not really what that sentence is sort of considering. It's saying, is there anything else that that isn't listed here that we need to think about, right? So we're essentially changing the language to say other factors which are deemed relevant, and not necessarily just at the discretion of planning and zoning or city council, right? Could be for any reason. Moving on to the UDC section, 2147D. Not a lot of changes here. Again, kind of just, eliminating some redundancies here. Combining 2 and 3 over here on the proposed side. We've added number 3 here to say the proposed amendment corrects an error, meets the challenge of changing conditions, or is in response to changes in state law. These are number 3 we do all the time. We're doing it here today, Ms. Marquez, as you saw. So we felt that that was really necessary to add that in there as part of our criteria. Again, number 4, we changed that to factors. On the next section is for zone change. Criteria for approval, 2154D. This one has quite a bit of changes. We've gone from 8 items to 4, and I'll walk you through that. So 1 and 2, again, kind of pretty similar, just kind of eliminating the redundancies. The comprehensive plan contains the future land use map, so of course that's what we're using. Number 3, on the proposed side, whether the uses permitted by the proposed changes will be consistent and appropriate with the existing uses in the immediate area. What we're essentially saying there is, is the zone change and the uses that are allowed within that district consistent with what is in the area, right? A lot of, you kind of get that in number 3 here, but we use the language appropriate to kind of, or consistent, because that's what we constantly do in our analysis. We just want to include it in number 3 here. So you see that we've gotten rid of 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I'll kind of touch on that here in a minute. But when we're going through these criteria for approval, we often say no, 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 or this does not affect the consideration or recommendation. And so if we're consistently doing this, then we just feel like we could propose to eliminate it. These proposed changes in accords with plans, with public streets and water supply and sanitary sewer, we do that in the development process already. And oftentimes when we have these zone changes, we get hung up on whether there's a water line there or not, or whether there's a street there or not. And the zoning action doesn't really pertain to that necessarily. I mean, sure, that's something you can consider. But if they're going to build something there and they don't have the water line there today, we're going to make them do it to provide access. That's not really a zoning consideration. And again, on number 8 here, we changed that to the factors, just being consistent with our other changes. And so, as I mentioned before, the other changes in 2154D, we're eliminating this zoning map amendment. And what this really is a holdover from the past. There were times where you would make a zone change and the map wouldn't actually get changed until much later. As technology has gotten a lot better, you can basically do that the next day. So it's not really necessary to put it in there because we will never make a zone change and not make a zoning map amendment at the same time. So this back taxes thing that you'll see that we're striking, now, did a lot of research on this. Not sure why it was there. It's not really a requirement in the state. Best guess from staff side is that there was this whole section in the 2012 charter about tax assessor collector duties and how when to get taxes and when to levy them. And it does kind of allude to development applications in this section of the charter. In 2015, 3 years later, the city eliminated this whole section and there was no information in the current charter at all about any of this. So the whole back taxes requirement, we think, was probably a holdover from that time. And so since we're not doing that anymore, this is one of the things that when we're always up here saying that this doesn't affect the consideration. You know, they will not be able to record a plat or do anything like that without back taxes being paid. So, you know, we collect them at other times. So it's not really necessary anymore. Finally, the specific use permit. This one is probably the one we're making the most adjustments to because there's 10 criteria in total currently. And a lot of that, as Ms. Marquez mentioned in the previous presentation, you know, we don't require site plans for specific use permits anymore. We used to make them do the whole site plan process. And a lot of these requirements on the left side about, you know, mitigating impacts and providing roadway adjustments and all those things are done with the site plan process. And since the SUP is now done at the very beginning, it's sort of the start of the process, we no longer really require that site plan, and there's no way for them to us to really accurately analyze that with these criteria. So again, what we're proposing here, as you'll see at number one, we kind of kept the language consistent. We also put in here, and I believe I forgot to mention in the last section that, you know, are these policies, is this proposed use consistent with the policies of the adopted comprehensive land plan and also any other applicable plan? So this allows us to use the strategic plan in our analysis. It allows us to use the master thoroughfare plan in our analysis. We basically want to, you know, bring in all other policies or plans that the city have to use for this, for our analysis here. Number 3 was added in. This is a new one. The proposed use is compatible with and preserves the character and integrity of adjacent developments and neighborhoods. Essentially, what we're eliminating with 3, or we're proposing to eliminate with 3, 4, 5, and I think 6, 7, that essentially wraps all of those things into one sentence. I mean, that's really what the intent of these are, to make sure that the use is compatible and preserves the character and integrity of adjacent developments and neighborhoods. On number 4 is proposed because this is what we think that the specific use permit is really about, right? There's a lot of permitted uses that you're just allowed to do by right. You can go in and pull a permit with a platted lot tomorrow and just do it. However, the specific use permit is special, and we want to, you know, have a little more strict criteria and look at it with a little more careful lens to make sure that it is compatible with the surrounding uses. So number 4, we said the proposed use will not just promote the overall health and safety and general welfare, which is what we have written currently, but will not adversely affect the overall health, safety, and general welfare of the city. So in a real, how do these, changing the criteria for approval, we look at the criteria for approval, right? This change to the UDC text. Just go through these one by one. Hopefully one day these will be shorter. Number 1, the proposed amendment promotes the health, safety, and general welfare of the city and the safe, orderly, efficient, and healthful development of the city. So the UDC does function better when it matches our current practices. For example, the SUP process. It's better for the residents of Schertz, for applicants, and for staff when there is continuity and clarity throughout the UDC, and streamlining our criteria for approval will assist with the orderly and efficient development of the city. Number 2, amendment to the text is consistent with other policies of the city. So many of these proposed amendments reflect changes in the charter, adopted ordinances and policies, and updated city practices. So these amendments, frankly, are consistent with these policies of the UDC and the city. Any proposed amendment is consistent with the goals and objectives of this UDC and the city. I like to bring in the strategic plan here. One of the stated goals for the operational values of the city is to be proactive, meaning initiating change by anticipating future situations. And also it is the responsibility of staff to be continuously improving and evolving and forward thinking with these amendments. And for that, we think these goals do achieve the strategic plan objectives. And then number 4 are the criteria which at the discretion of planning and zoning and city council are deemed relevant and important in the consideration of these amendments. Staff has received no special consideration at this point. This public hearing is to provide the opportunity for Planning and Zoning Commission to determine this. These amendments align with the goals, objectives, and policies of the UDC and the city, and therefore staff is recommending approval of PLUDC 2024-0195.
All right, thank you, Sam. Okay, another public hearing. And I'm going to call this one 7:20 p.m. Anyone wishing to address the commission? No one? All right, 7:21 p.m. Public input is closed. Commissioners, questions, comments, discussion? All right. Sam, can you go back to the SUP slide? That one right there. Go back one more. Let me see if I can figure out what my comment here was. Oh, it's, how do I want to say this? Of course, it's certainly shorter and more concise than the old one, and it's probably the same issue we've had with the old one, is that, you know, compatible is not that big a deal. You know, that's kind of where neighborhood services, you know, we expect a drugstore or, you know, even a gas station to be compatible with, say, a residential area. But when we start talking about preserving the character and integrity of adjacent developments, I think that's where we can get ourselves, or we leave ourselves open to criticism, because certainly, you know, putting a convenience store with gas pumps in front of a single family subdivision I can argue that certainly doesn't preserve the character and integrity. Again, I think it's compatible, but I'm not sure there are any better words.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe you've given us less words to argue about. So.
It is what's currently in the code.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we kept
Alrighty.
that area there, but.
So go to your next page, because I want to talk about number 6.
Okay.
The proposed use incorporates features of minimize adverse effects, including visual impacts of the proposed use of adjacent properties. So how are we then going to ensure that, for instance, we've got the 8-foot masonry wall requirement, you know, a lot of the comments that we get from the residents talk about lighting.
Right.
Are those not the kind of things that 6 addresses? So if we eliminate that, how do we make sure those continue to be part of the process?
So I can tell you that every time that when we present a specific use permit to you and we say, number 6, yada, 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 we always say that Article 9 is in place to ensure that, you know, these effects are mitigated and minimized, and those are always in place during the site plan process. Mm-hmm. Really, this is the specific use permit. We're really talking about the use itself. how the site intermingles with what's around it is done at a later stage in the development process.
Okay, and then just one more question from me. Next page. I think it's the last of your criteria. I think it's number 4. And of course, we've seen this a lot, and I've never thought to ask, but what do you mean by special considerations?
Yeah, I think oftentimes, we'll get a city council initiated item or a planning and zoning initiated item, and we'll say, hey, I want you guys to look at this and propose something, And then oftentimes, we might get, this might be published, and y'all might call up and say, hey, did y'all think about this, that, or the other? So in general, we don't really get a lot, and that's why we're kind of getting rid of it too, because it does seem, when does this really ever happen?
All right, no, that's good, thank you. Roderick, did you have something?
Yeah, and looking at the special use slide again, I was just wondering, is it with intentionality that it's so highly subjective? I think that's kind of the struggles that I know I've had in the past when certain proposals have come up. And I was just wondering if, when I read a lot of these, they're just purely subjective. Some of them, is that to provide as much latitude as possible in making an assessment, or?
I think the idea behind these changes is that, how do we properly analyze what traffic mitigation methods they're going to have, for example, at this stage? How do we ensure that when they come in with a specific use permit application, that they're not generating pedestrian vehicle traffic that will be hazardous or conflict, right? I mean, I think that's the whole point right now is that, we used to have a site plan process for the SUP that allowed us to answer all these questions. We no longer do that. So staff has to honestly stretch or bring in other parts of the UDC, right? And it's a bit of all this really is matching what we currently do in the city.
Right, and I would imagine that's a challenge for staff. Specifically in, the matter that came up regarding the gas station.
Sure.
Outside the neighborhood. I would think that, we have an opportunity to not necessarily do it like we've done it in the past, like the one that's on Church Parkway right down here.
Yeah.
Or the one that's the Valero that's down here that's, right behind the neighborhood. And I just wanted to know if we look at that and say, what, it was something we did. It may have been acceptable then.
Right.
Is it something we want to continue doing? And it provides a lot of latitude. I think when we had that meeting, my comment was, what do we want Schertz ultimately to look like, to be? So.
Yeah, and I think that if the idea is that we probably don't want gas stations in general business districts anymore, because that was the case, right? You can have a gas station in a general business district with a specific use permit. Mm-hmm. So we can take a look at it case-by-case basis with a specific use permit. Okay. And so there's plenty of general business districts in the city that are not anywhere near residential areas, right?
Right.
But some are.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that we can do our analysis is say, well, the specific use permit is there, right, to say, well, it might be appropriate here, but not there. Okay. And that's essentially what we're doing, and frankly, that's what's going on with that specific use permit as well.
All right. Okay. Thanks. I Appreciate it.
Yes, sir, that's exactly what the SUPs are for, to give us and city council basically the flexibility that, as you said, yeah, this certainly is okay here, but not here. Part of my problem, in, I don't want to get too far off track here, but since we talked about the convenience store with gas pumps out on 1518, it's a perfect example. We eliminated the need for or the requirement for a site plan because a case was made that that's a lot of expense for the developer to put in up front just to be disapproved. And so we eliminated that requirement. That was a conscious decision on our part and city council. I have second thoughts, but then, I wasn't, anyway. But, so getting back to what happens, and we see the same thing in zoning cases. When somebody wants to rezone a piece of property, it's irrelevant to the discussion of what they want to do on it. The discussion should be focused on whether or not that zoning is appropriate for that area, regardless of what they want to build on it. But you watched city council last night and that apartment complex, they got bogged down on the same thing we did. They were talking about access and all those things that are applicable to the project, not the zoning. When we considered the convenience store with gas pumps, we got hung up on access and lighting, and we were talking about the project, not, well, of course, SUPs, it really is about the project. But we get bogged down, and it's because of the way the process is set up. And even I know better, but we get bogged down in the weeds. And the problem here is you get an SUP that comes in where we used to be able to see a site plan that might have satisfied my particular objection to a project is no longer required. All of that now happens after the fact. And some of it is just dealing with change. We've delegated all of that stuff to staff. We used to do even just regular site plans used to come to planning and zoning, not just the SUP ones. They all came to us. We delegated that to them. And so part of it is that we want all these answers, and you've got 100 upset residents sitting out there, glaring daggers at you, and they all want answers. And the problem is those answers don't come at this particular part of the process. They come later. Well, we don't have any input at that point. They don't have any input at that point. It's all these guys, okay? So I think it's changed. Some of us just have I don't know how we get around that. You've heard me a couple of times try to steer us back onto track. So now I've even lost track of where I was going. I guess we have to have and that was my question about the fencing and all that kind of stuff. It's somewhere else in the process. It's not that we're doing away with it altogether. It's still, but it's part of a downstream process.
Right.
Okay. And that sometimes is the difficulty. Richard?
Thank you. Just a side note, I'd like to get site plans back, but I don't know if that'll ever happen. I think the proposed changes gives us the leeway to include everything that you're taking out of your proposed changes. We have the leeway to discuss things like noise and and odors and traffic and all those kinds of things. And we still have the ability to object or be in favor of those things. So I kind of agree with what Rod was talking about. We have leeway now, which is good, without being bogged down in all kind of different specifics. But we talked, you were talking briefly about zoning, and zoning gets bogged down in the actual business that's going to be proposed in the zoning category. And that gets us bogged down and sidetracked and causes hour-long meetings, suppose. I'll just ask the question to staff. Do we need, or would it be beneficial to us to create more zoning districts? And create a zoning district, and, you know, have a GB that has nice, unobtrusive stuff, and have a GB something else that has gas stations, automotive repair, noise, clanging, stinky stuff. You know, maybe we need to have more zoning categories. So if somebody wants to do something close to a neighborhood, we know right away from the zoning that they're proposing, whether it's going to be something good or something intrusive or something kind of neutral. So I don't know.
That is a conversation we can have, and also a good segue to the next application, but.
Yeah, so just something to think about. Maybe we need some more zoning categories.
Okay.
Otherwise, I like what you've done.
So you're confident, and Emily and Daisy and, I'm sorry.
William.
Yeah, I'll learn his name one of these days. You folks are confident that by skinning these things down, we're not giving anything, we're not giving up anything. We're yeah, okay?
Yes.
All right. Anybody else?
I do have a question. Okay, so like, for instance, number 4, the proposed use will not adversely affect. Why not make it like promote? Why? Because it just, for me, it's like setting the bar at the bare minimum when you say not adversely affect, but I figure there's a reason to it.
Yeah, because I think I mean, I'll say this, we could put promote in there if you think that that's a good idea. I think that the adversely affecting specifically speaks to the SUP process, and that we are looking at this to ensure that where this is going is not going to adversely affect, you know, other people, right? The specific use permit almost has that connotation of like, okay, this is a little bit of a tricky use. We want to make sure that it's not going to be, you know, affecting anybody in a bad way. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think Danielle, I heard a couple of I agrees down here, so. All right, anybody else? Okay, once again, this is a recommendation to City Council. We can recommend approval, denial, or we can recommend approval with changes, or we can send them all back to the drawing board and do it again. So whatever is your pleasure.
I'll make a motion to approve PL UDC 2024195 as presented. Or recommend approval if I didn't say that.
Second.
I have a motion to recommend approval of PL UDC 2024-01, I gotta make sure I get the right one, 0195 from Commissioner Wallace, a second from Commissioner Goldick, correct? Yes. Any further discussion? All right, please record your votes. All right, I have 6 votes. If you would publish that, please. I have 6 ayes, none opposed. That motion passes. All right, item 5C, another public hearing. PLUDC 2024-0186, conduct a public hearing, workshop, and discussion, and possible action to make a recommendation on amendments to Part 3 of the Schertz Code of Ordinances, Unified Development Code, UDC, to Article 5, zoning districts, and Article 10, parking standards.
Thank you, Commissioner. PLUDC 2024-0186, UDC amendments to Article 5 and Article 10, Samuel Haas, Senior Planner. So traditionally in Schertz, we typically get two products in the city when it comes to housing. We get a single-family detached home, and we also get apartment blocks. These are both from the city of Schertz, by the way. But recently there's been trends in development that call for a lower density, dispersed, kind of townhomey style developments. They're multifamily in function, what you commonly is referred to as build to rent. And right now in the city, we don't really have anything that can capture this sort of market. And I'll bring up an example of what's currently in Schertz. And this is the Schertz Station PDD. They went the PDD route because they have multiple uses and they're building a road and they've got all these different things that they're putting in. But when we're selecting the PDDs, or when an applicant is applying for a PDD, they have to select a base zoning district. And what they do is typically I'll show you here. So in the front, they selected general business and they made little modifications here and there, and that's what they did with it. But in the back, in this multifamily piece, they selected R4, which is 24 units per acre and all the stuff that comes with R4, because we didn't really have an accurate zoning district, and they reduced the density and they did some other things to it, and that's what they selected. Similarly, right here we have the Schertz Gateway PDD, and this is up on Schwab Road, up on 35, and they did something similar as well. They did a PDD, had to select some base zoning districts, so they did general business, they did a traditional R4 right here, and then, but for the back portion, what you see here in these more lower density style townhome products, they didn't have a zoning district to pick, so they picked R4 again. And so essentially, what we're proposing is that, the PDDs have been how do I say in a nice way? The PDDs have been often a source of, concern and confusion and friction and all these things that go along with it, which is not outside the ordinary for typical zoning, but PDD especially. And so what staff is proposing is that we allow for, applicants to perhaps maybe select a base zoning district and go straight zoning rather than do the PDD route, which they can't do currently with this BTR trend. So staff is proposing to establish a new zoning district and then also modify our existing R4. And so this presentation will be in two parts essentially. So first we'll start with the first proposal, the new zoning district. Staff is proposing to call this the middle density residential R5 district. It's going to be lower density than our R4 district. It's going to provide incentives for smaller multifamily developments, which I'll get into later. And this will actually help us capture those market trends and provide a variety of housing products in the city. So we'll do this by 5 sections, amending 5 sections in the UDC, and I'll go through these one by one. So in 2152, this is just a table in the UDC that lists all our zoning districts that we currently have. You'll see that there is no R5. It jumps from R4 to R6. Don't know why that is, but it works out perfectly for us. So we just decided to add the R5 and call it middle density residential district. So the statement of purpose and intent, this is the narrative that every district has in the city, commercial and non-commercial, commercial and residential, sorry. And so I'm going to go through this just line by line because it is kind of a lot. So R5 district is intended to provide developments that offer a variety of housing types. This district is a suitable transition between single-family residential and commercial and or denser multifamily developments. That's kind of alluding to what we're going to go into with R4. It is comprised of attached or detached residential dwelling units. When tracts in this district are 1 acre or less, density shall not exceed 16 units per acre, and these tracts will be required to adhere to single-family site design requirements in Article 9. When tracts exceed 1 acre, density shall not exceed 12 units per gross acre, and these tracts will be required to adhere to multifamily site design requirements and provide 10% of the total platted area as common usable open space. And I'll kind of explore this in a little bit in a second. So to 2157, This is the dimensional table that has a lot of our minimum requirements. So in R5, you'll see that there's 10,890 square feet as a minimum. That is not a random number, that is a quarter of an acre. This ensures that people aren't just trying to game the system and make little small lot single-family subdivisions like we see all the time. And you'll see that there's no width and there's no depth minimum on this. But by ensuring that we have a quarter acre, we kind of get some of that width and depth already. The height is 35, pretty common, 80% max impervious coverage. And on the key, we added a key in here that says minimum building separation is 10 feet. This is on the, if you'll notice that the side yard setbacks are still 10 feet if they want to do lot by lot. But if they're going to do this big, large lot developments like we're seeing in these build to rents, we're going to ensure that building separation is 10 feet and that there's no HVAC units or fences that are within the separation space. This is done consulting with our fire department to ensure that those HVACs and fences won't be there. In 2158, pretty standard residential uses. Churches, gated communities, golf course, multifamily dwelling, single family dwelling, park, school, two-family. These are all in other districts, essentially just our standard residential uses. In the parking section, 21.510, so we see here that the middle density housing types, this goes back into that 1 acre and less and over. So for 1 acre or less, 1 space per unit. For tracts exceeding 1 acre, 2 spaces per unit. So getting into the 1 acre or less, staff felt that we would like to have or provide space for smaller developments to come in. And by doing that, have a little bit of bonuses, if you will, for these smaller developments. So if you are coming in, maybe you've got a small lot, less than an acre, the density is 16 units per acre with a quarter acre lot minimum. So you're talking about a multifamily housing product or unit with 4 to 16 units. 1 parking space required, that's part of that bonus. You are required to adhere to the single family site design requirements. So there's still some small landscaping requirements, some trees, some vegetation, but there is no 20-foot landscape buffer from the right of way. There is no landscape buffer next to single family districts since these are smaller in nature anyway. No 8-foot masonry wall next to single family districts, and 2 trees per lot versus 9 trees per acre, which is how we do it in the multifamily. So what would this look like, right? You know, again, instead of, the reason that the staff is trying to encourage this is because often we see developers come in, and they put 200 units down right next to a single family subdivision, and and it's always a developer that's from out of town with deep pockets. Well, what if we can get some needed housing with some more local development, and maybe you don't have to build 24 units an acre. You can build a 4-plex. You could build an 8-plex, or for an acre, you could build 16 units. Now, I know that building looks a little scary, but we still have height requirements in the city, so you wouldn't be able to actually go this tall. But this is just to kind of demonstrate what a 16-unit complex might look like. And so staff got with GIS, our GIS department, to kind of show all the parcels that are currently in the city that are between a quarter acre and an acre. So this is where potentially, hypothetically, these developments could go today, right? If you were to go and rezone these parcels to R5. And you kind of see that it's dispersed all over the city. It's not concentrated in one area. So you have some over here in like the Eckerd Road area. You have a lot over here off of Schertz Parkway, and then FM 399 right here. Some back here in this area. In the middle of Schertz, a lot of it's going down FM 3009, a lot on 78 as well. And then going down in the South Schertz, you'll see that a lot of this is down 1518, Schaefer, Lower Seguin, stuff like that. So just to kind of demonstrate that this kind of housing could be dispersed all over the city necessarily, it doesn't have to be concentrated in one area. For the over 1 acre, it's actually pretty straightforward. It's 12 units per acre, 2 parking spaces per unit. and you're required to adhere to all multifamily design requirements. Nothing really crazy there. And if you're wondering what that might look like, well, it's already in Schertz right now. This is Schertz Station. Their PDD states that this is 12 units per acre. That's what we are going with here. And for Schertz Gateway, theirs is 10 units per acre. So we kind of already have, we're already noticing this product coming into the city as it is. So proposal number 2, modifying the existing multifamily R4 district. We want to go denser, we want to go taller. I know that's scary, but we want to be more selective with the appropriateness of location. So we start with modifying the narrative portion, and there's a lot there, so I'll just kind of clean that up for you there, and I'll read this for you. R4 is intended to provide denser apartment and multifamily style developments. This district is a suitable transition between single family districts and commercial uses, because there's nothing inherently wrong with having an apartment next to a single family neighborhood. We want to ensure that we're not trying to imply that. However, apartment multifamily residential districts shall not be located in areas where they would increase traffic with access through single family neighborhoods, and shall be located adjacent to arterial streets. The maximum density shall be 35 units per acre, with 20% of the total platted area as common open space. So here's a comparison. This is 2157 again. We have proposing to up the area square footage to 43,560. Again, that's not a random number, that is 1 acre. The minimum width is being up to 400 feet. This is to help ensure 2 points of access, which is typically a 400-foot separation. And then we're also proposing to up the height requirement to 50 feet. Now, the reason why we did this and we chose these numbers, they weren't random. We did some target city research. We always look at what our neighbors are doing and what other places are doing around the state. We chose our density is fairly on par with what people are doing around us. However, San Marcos goes higher, Temple, San Antonio, of course, goes higher. There's actually districts in San Antonio that have no cap on density, but you'll see McKinney goes a little higher. And when you look at height requirements, we're actually a little under what everybody else is doing. We're some of the, other than Universal City, we're a little bit shorter. So we chose the 35 dwelling units per acre because that's what has been approved in Schertz Gateway, that project I showed you earlier up by Schwab Road. Council's already seems to be comfortable with that. We thought that was the next logical step up. And then 1518 apartments, those were approved via PDD to be 45 feet tall. The reason why staff is choosing 50 feet is to provide a little bit of architectural freedom if they need it. And here is an example of a 51.5-foot building. It's not super scary. It's an extra story. Yes, it's 4 stories. But given that extra 5 feet, staff feels that allows people to have a little more decorative elements in the buildings. And so in terms of placement, that sentence in the narrative that said, they shall be located on arterial streets. What you see in the red, this is our master thoroughfare plan, by the way, and what you see in the red and in the yellow are our arterial streets. So the red is the principal arterials, and the yellow is the secondary. And so you can kind of envision where apartment complex they have to go now. They shall go if this is approved. So along Schertz Parkway, 3009, Schaefer, Lower Seguin. This is to help ensure that you're not just going to slap down some dense apartments in some random neighborhood that's got a parcel for sale. And to summarize all these proposals, establishing R5, minimum quarter-acre lots, 12 units per acre, but the under-acre bonuses, less parking, single-family site requirements, 16 dwelling units per acre, and to also modify R4, minimum acre lots, upping the density, upping the height maximum, making it a little bit wider for the lots, no access through single-family neighborhoods, and must be adjacent to arterial streets. So, criteria for approval, 2147D. The proposed amendment promotes the health, safety, and general welfare of the city, and the safe, orderly, efficient, healthful development of the city. So the UDC with development functions better when we provide adequate zoning district options for applicants. To balance the demand for housing while attempting to alleviate the friction between established neighborhoods and incoming development. We feel like these amendments do that, and they satisfy criteria number 1. Number 2, an amendment to the text is consistent with other policies of this UDC and the city. So with the approval of Schertz Gateway PDD and Schertz Station PDD, these amendments are attempting to codify what has already been recently adopted policy. The strategic plan policy values also say that for a high quality of life, it is a well-planned community that creates convenient living, and it is not limited options for work, live, and play. So these amendments are consistent with other policies in the cities and satisfy criteria number 2. So any proposed amendment that is consistent with the goals and objectives of this UDC and the city. So the UDC explicitly strives to prevent the overcrowding of land and the undue concentration or diffusion of population by forcing people to choose between single-family neighborhoods and high-density apartments. Basically allowing these amendments would allow for another option, right? And also help with some of that friction that's there with the current apartment complex or apartment district. And that kind of touches on the next bullet point there, which is the goal to minimize conflicts among uses of land and buildings. So providing an in-between option and then revising the R4, being more selective with the placement will help. Again, with the strategic plan, our operational values of the city is to be innovative. Innovative is finding a better way to do things and to be creative, which is what staff feels that this proposal does. Being proactive, it means initiating change by anticipating future situations in order to make things happen. We have something in the city, that a product that's coming in, staff is being proactive to try to capture some of that in a thoughtful, meaningful way. So these amendments, this satisfies criteria number 3, as these amendments are consistent with the UDC and the city goals and objectives. So other criteria which, at the discretion of the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, are deemed relevant and important. There's actually something on this slide this time. August 6, 2024, the City Council had a workshop with staff over this. Council received this proposal positively, very little comments, and directed staff to move forward with the amendment process. That's why we're here today. Other than that, there's no special consideration from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and this public hearing does provide the opportunity for the Planning and Zoning Commission to determine this. These amendments do align with the goals, objectives, and policies of the UDC and the city, and therefore staff is recommending approval of PL UDC 20240186.
Thank you, Sam. All right, another public hearing. It is 7:57 p.m. And the same huge crowd that's been out there all night. All right, I don't see anybody wanting to, so anyway, we'll open public comment at 7:57 and we will close it at 7:57. Okay, if you would back up, Sam, which slide was it? The site plan or the dimensions? I think go forward one more.
You want to see the key?
I want the one where, I want the notes at the bottom. Because I want to tell you to get out of my head, okay? You anticipated that, didn't you? Okay. And that is, it's something I did want to discuss, because a couple of them I've seen come in here. And what they do, particularly I think if we look at that one that's up there behind, where was it? Up there behind, is it behind Schertz Station?
Yeah, that is part of Schertz Station.
No, there's one where at front, the commercial's on 35, and then they've got some R4, and then they go back up adjacent to the residential, and there's some more. You know what I'm talking about? You had a picture of it here. Gateway.
Gateway, yeah.
That's probably it.
That one?
So what I saw when we looked at that, when we get into the multi-buildings here in the back part, is rather than plat these as individual lots where the setbacks would guarantee 10-foot side setbacks and all that, they came in here and they want to plat this thing as one huge lot.
Right.
And then they'll put some, I'll call it traditional multifamily apartments over here, but then they wanted to disperse some of these 1 and 2, or even I don't remember if they were talking about single family, but I know they were talking about possibly duplexes. And my concern was, those building setbacks apply to the whole big lot, not to the individual buildings. So how do we, I'm not concerned about what I call traditional R4, because those don't fall into the residential code. Those, you know, the building code will allow you to build 2 commercial buildings with no separation if you meet certain requirements. My concern has always been, how do we continue to preserve those building separations when we're not doing the individual lots? And so I think was that your intent with?
Yeah, actually, yes.
With note Q. Let's see, what else did I write here? And I appreciate that, thank you. And I'm just hoping that because again, my concern is not because once you get into 3 or more units, then you're subject to the building code, not the residential code, so. But thank you for that, appreciate it. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, couple of questions. Is there a reason why certain retail components, I understand this, I don't think the intent of this is to make it a necessarily mixed-use district, but if we're looking to apply this to projects that the overall goal is, you know, you have a retail component and a residential component, is there a reason why we're not permitting certain commercial aspects in it as well?
So staff has not proposed that, just because we haven't traditionally had that. The only district we have in the city that allows that is our Main Street district.
Correct.
So it's just something that staff didn't propose, but I understand, I mean, like a ground floor retail or coffee shop or something, and then units above it, something like that. If the commission would like to propose that, then staff can go back and look at that.
Okay.
So.
Because that's the only thing, just working in development, I think it's one, you see a lot of these projects. I mean, this is the hot trend. And it is something that there's definitely a lot of great bones for already. Like what you're proposing is exactly what I think would be included, and especially with the design guidelines like what Commissioner Outlaw was talking about, I just think that including some appropriate commercial uses would allow for you to, you know, really kind of preemptively look at what's being built, what's coming, what would be appropriate to mix with what you're proposing. And especially, I mean, these big PDD districts where it's something that's already there.
Right.
So if we're looking to avoid having to have all these different zonings, wouldn't it be appropriate just to include uses that we think would be appropriate to go with lighter, I mean, with, you know, these different types of multifamily uses, and create these kind of bigger district projects that we're looking at?
Yeah, I think we'd have to kind of probably go and look at the UDC and make sure that there's other sections that say, because a lot of in our UDC it explicitly says that no commercial and residential shall be on the same lot, for instance.
Yeah.
Right? And so that would require changes to that as well. So we'd kind of have to,
maybe this is something.
if the intent is to add some commercial permitted uses to this, then that would require us to go back and kind of, you know, really comb through the UDC to make sure that we're eliminating the conflicts there, and that would be just for this specific district. And I think right now the reason why we didn't do that is because we thought that there might be a little bit much of a lift right now, and that, you know, we could always establish the R5 and then go back and say, hey, let's clean it up and put some uses in there. But you know, that's why we thought we do baby steps first, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Okay. Other than that, I don't have any other questions, just that this is great. I think it's, well, actually, I do have one other question. Is there a reason that we didn't allow R4 along collectors?
So when you do collectors, they kind of go through, I'll just, you know, it's public knowledge. I'll go back, you know, you can go back and look at it, but let's
Yeah.
look at Country Club Boulevard, right? There was basically a multifamily project that was proposed along this that was, the citizens voiced a lot of concerns, right? And Country Club Boulevard is not capable of that kind of traffic. That's
Okay.
at its current point. Granted, with development, improvements happen, but given that most of the apartments that come in are usually hundreds of units all at once,
Yeah.
staff felt that there was plenty of space in our arterial areas for.
So that includes secondary arterials
Yes.
as well? Okay.
And that's why we also went up in density,
Yeah.
because if we're gonna take, we want to actually give a little space and provide a little bit too.
Okay. I was just wanting to make sure that we weren't just limiting this to primaries.
Right.
But that's it. Okay.
Just, yeah, all arterials, secondary, and principal. Yep.
That's it.
So with that criteria, Homestead up there, where they amended part of their, of course, that's a PDD up there, isn't it?
Correct.
So if somebody wanted to build apartments on Eckerd Road, that wouldn't fit the new criteria?
Correct.
Okay. And, you know, what Mr. Wallace was talking about, I think part of the allowing other uses is what really is the intent of the R5. And part of it is to allow small development. And, you know, if you're only talking about an acre or maybe 2 acres, you know, in my mind, I don't know that it's feasible to include retail. But they would always have the option of trying to do it to do a PDD with a base R5. They could do something like that if they wanted to.
Correct. Right.
And so if I understood you correctly right now, you know, typically, well, you see some of it up in the Austin area and of course, downtown San Antonio. Right now in Schertz, we don't allow this, and I don't know what you call it, but where the ground floor is retail, commercial, and then the residential above it. We don't allow that right now, correct?
Currently only on Main Street.
Okay. Because I remember when they built this, and I don't even know, it's been so long since I've been in it, but when we built this first 3-story mini storage up here at 35 and 3009, there was an apartment in it, and that was, I don't remember how we did that, but yeah, that required some special considerations, if I remember right. And again, I don't even know if it's still there, if they still do that. Richard, did you have something?
Yeah. Back on the Gateway project, does being a sort of adjacent to 35, does that qualify as being next to an arterial?
So, no, it would not.
Okay.
So the way that we're proposing is that you have to be adjacent to
So
an arterial.
with the increase in the height standards and the requirement to be adjacent to an arterial, we can have 50-foot tall structures popping up along, and I'll just use 3009 and Schertz Parkway, 50-foot tall structures directly adjacent to residential neighborhoods.
That's correct.
I don't like that.
But the way that the code is written is that 50-foot tall structure cannot have access through that neighborhood, the way that we're proposing it. And
But you'll have a single-family residential unit, and then directly behind, across the fence, will be a 4-story multifamily unit.
That's correct, but also, you know, there is, as we talked about earlier, in the criteria for approval, there's also plenty of latitude for the commission and for counselors and for staff to determine whether or not that is an appropriate location. Sure, it satisfies the minimum requirements, but then there's other leeway in the city for us to make our determination, our analysis.
But we've had a lot of heated discussion in this room before with apartment complexes going up against residential neighborhoods along 3009.
Right.
I don't remember any on Schertz Parkway.
No.
But on 3009, and I think by adopting the changes that you're proposing today, I think it's going to become a more intense discussion because we're allowing, up the as small as quarter-acre units. And so we can have multifamily units proliferate up and down 3009 and Schertz Parkway adjacent to single-family homes because of the smaller lot requirements. So,
But that would be R5, not R4.
Yeah, and that's a 35-foot.
Yeah, the R5 would still have the 35 minimum.
And correct me if I'm wrong, other than where we've already, or council's already approved there's some R4 for submitted projects, there is nothing in the city that is zoned R4, sitting there waiting for some new developer to come in and put up an apartment complex. So anything, if somebody wanted to build R4 behind you there on Schertz Parkway, well, that's not zoned R4. It would have to be rezoned. And correct?
Right.
So getting back again, and I hate to keep picking on them, but Gateway seems to be a good example or at least a good picture to look at. If you go to the drawing with, yeah, right there. So if they were to come in with this project today, that back part would not fit the criteria for R4
Correct.
because it takes access through the subdivision, but it could be R5.
Correct.
R5 can come through, correct? Okay. Did you want to say something?
I was just going to clarify that there is one property in the city that's zoned R4 that does not have an active apartment complex on it, but it is zoned for R4 and could be an apartment complex down on 1518. So there are some in the city that aren't developed yet.
All the way down there almost to 10.
To 10, right,
Kinda
yeah, that's
over
right.
Next to
there on
Halley's.
Halley's Cove or whatever. Right, well,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
You all go ahead.
Well, first, I wanted to say, I think this is a really good idea. Yeah, I also wanted to bring up the 50-foot. It seems a little excessive, especially when we talk so much about Schertz and the small town feel. That would take away from it. Unless it would be like a push for developers to do that R5,
Sure.
then that would make sense, I guess. But then, okay, just thinking out loud, the shops idea, to keep that small town feel, I can see taking those the 50-foot R4 and putting shops on those just to be different, but also I don't know. Like I said, just thinking out loud, throwing it out there.
Sure.
All right, thanks.
And I mean, the reason why we chose 50 feet, because 45 is the standard, or is pretty common around here. And so we thought 35 was a little too restricted, especially if we're going up in density. It would be just playing devil's advocate here. If you're allowing more units, but you're still squashing it down a floor, it might negate the fact that the density has gone up anyway. But if 50 seems too much and 45 seems more digestible, we could also change it. There's space here. We just thought that the added 5 feet allowed developers to make the buildings prettier. So
just to clarify on that, the 50 feet, that's not an additional floor. We're really talking about an architectural feature.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
45 feet would be 4 stories.
Correct. And these areas are realistically intended to be used along the highway.
Correct.
Correct. So,
Yeah, you know, that extra 5 feet would allow them to do a parapet wall and maybe screen some of the rooftop structures and
Right.
thing, and just make the firefighter's job that much harder, but anyway. Roderick, you have something?
A couple things. First, I would like to highly thank staff for the intentionality of this. I think it's amazing. Certainly thinking outside of the box for standard or what we or normally would see in Schertz. And forward thinking because, you know, different people, different generations want different housing options, right? And I wanted to ask, did Freeze recommend some of this in their final?
Yeah, the comp plan talks about promoting as a long-range vision areas of town that could be a little more walkable and a little bit easier to get around without driving. And I think the reason why they propose that is because one of the main, issues in this town is traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can, create a development pattern that has, like we're seeing on the screen right now,
Mm-hmm.
opportunities for our residents to just, walk to wherever, then, that is one of the long-range goals for the comp plan.
Okay.
And staff feels like this is one of the ways that we can slowly get there.
Okay, and that's a perfect segue into what Mr. Wallace had mentioned regarding having retail on that bottom floor to make it really more enticing, to have those types of options where people can come in, from working in Austin all weekend and
Sure.
park their vehicle and don't have to get in it again until Monday when it's time to go back. But they can still shop and eat and walk. So, so thinking of being intentional about that, I would just highly, recommend that we put that type of thought into the zoning proposals or districts we're proposing as well.
And again, like I was saying to Commissioner Wallace, if we can go back to the drawing board and we can kind of come up with some bigger changes in the UDC that would allow that, and we would have to kind of look through and make sure that we're not violating other sections of the UDC to do that. We could do that, or we could establish the zoning district and with the idea that we can come back in and then maybe at a later date look to do some of that.
Yeah, I just, that later date or later year,
Gotcha.
yeah, I mean, if there's an appetite for it, I just would say at least look into it. I don't, but I think, what was proposed is pretty amazing, certainly forward-thinking, I think. And I think we need it, quite honestly. I'm sure y'all look at what's available as far as land, whether it's in South Schertz or along 35, but if there's an opportunity, I would highly recommend looking into it, at least doing an evaluation. We certainly, as Mr. Richard identified, don't necessarily want a 50-foot structure
Right.
across from a residential neighborhood. And I guess if we're being intentional about it, as long as we, codify it where we have the ability to be intentional about what we approve or don't approve, then it's fine. But I just wanted to thank you and staff for looking into this. I think it's a huge step forward. And I would just say that, you know, I know that there have been people that have lived in Schertz for a while and may not want it to change, but it's gonna happen, right? And to be intentional about it, at least lets people know that, and lets the residents know there's been some thought put into it, and this is what we ultimately want our city to look like, to be about. So I just wanted to say that, but thank you.
I have a question. Are there developers already in place that have asked for this type of R5?
So we've had some people exploring it a little bit and asking questions. Not so much specifically like, hey, when's that coming in? But I have a 10 to 12 unit per acre product that I would like to do in Schertz. And, you know, so yeah, there's been, and I think the trend, as I mentioned before, is that a lot of people are wanting to do these build to rent complexes. And it's a way to have all the perks of, it's like the best of both worlds. You can have the feel of like your own house, but you still have a gardener coming in and mowing all your grass and taking care of your bushes and stuff. So,
Right.
so yeah, it seems to be that that's where a lot of stuff is going. So.
It definitely is. You see that type of housing in San Antonio and some other places. I think it's a great idea to have that opportunity. And I like the idea of being able to see where these lots are available throughout the city, and seeing some of those things dispersed throughout, I think is favorable. And with the current housing market, there's definitely a place for a build to rent type situation. And I know the younger people more and more are wanting a nice place to rent. They feel like, I have 4 adult children, they feel like they're never going to be able to buy in our economy. So there's definitely a place for this type of housing. I'm excited to see it. But I also agree with Mr. Wallace as well. If you ever go to like Frisco, Plano, some of those places, they have the retail below. Of course, this is forward thinking a few years from now, but I would love to see Schertz eventually be there, because I know that younger generations, I say that because I'm getting older, they like that idea of just going downstairs, grabbing a coffee, you know, or just being able to walk and shop and having everything right there, and without the maintenance of the grass and, you know, whatever, washing the car, I mean, whatever it is, you know, they want that kind of multifamily, lower maintenance, or not having to be as responsible for the exterior. But I think there's definitely a market for it, and it's exciting to see. And I would love to be one of these developers, to build one of these fourplexes and maybe have my kids live in all those different units. It's really exciting to see. So, and thank you guys for putting all this together.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Wallace.
Oh, it's just for, you know, we keep coming back to the idea of the retail component. So let's say we recommend approval, this goes to city council. You know, I don't want to try and propose changes to something immediately. But I think it would also be beneficial to, while we're, you know, 2 projects in, we're not 9 projects in, 10 projects in, and then they're retroactively, oh, we want to add this. You know, is this something that, would it be beneficial that we just proceed with the base, how we have it? Because I think, you know, most people up here can agree that what we have is good. And then, you know, just have this as a workshop item within, you know, the next couple months or something. Really my question was, could we make a UDC amendment, not almost immediately, but.
Yeah, if you'd like to do a workshop in a couple months, say November's P&Z meeting, we can schedule that. You know, you could email the planning staff, and we can start working on that.
Cool.
And we could go from there.
Yes, it's item 6A on tonight's agenda.
Well, and I just wanted to make sure we weren't going to hit we've approved this, we can't update this for a year or something. Not to try and rush it, but, you know, just the way the development trends move, I would just hate for us to miss out on a really great project with some really great features, just because, you know, we can't make an update for a while. So that's it.
Would a developer be able to, or someone be able to come in and say, this is my vision, this is what I'd like to do? In many cases with commercial real estate, it takes time. I mean, it's not something they could come in and say, this is my vision, as we saw with Country Club and all that. That was years and years. I mean, could somebody come in and say, my idea is to do this retail space with lofts or whatever, residential living above? Can I apply for a zoning? And then we address it and say, okay, we have someone in place that wants to do this in this particular lot, then, or would that process just take a really long time to do an amendment to the UDC?
Yeah, no, I think what you're asking is, can an applicant request a
Correct, that's what I
UDC
meant, not
revision? And yes,
developer, an applicant.
they can.
They can.
It's in our UDC that, you know, an applicant can request a revision, and you can make the specific revision. Staff can draft it up, make our recommendation, and it goes through the same
Right.
process that we're going through now. I think typically, we're just used to staff or city
Yeah.
council or somebody else initiating it, but yeah, you can absolutely do it.
Yes, so it doesn't have to be, I mean, it's good to be proactive, but it could be reactive to an applicant coming in.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and just to counter that, I mean, you know, I think the cost and the uncertainty of that, I mean, even in these normal zoning cases, you know, last week when we had the specific use permit, you know, what am I going to get out of my development? You know, I would hate, I think in my mind, what I see as if we wait for them to come to us, what projects would we lose out on to New Braunfels, San Marcos, you know, any of these other, you know, similar cities who might already have these policies in place. So.
Well, I know Roderick's got something, but I'm going to jump in here and say, you know, my personal opinion is the developers come here. They come to Schertz because they want to. And sometimes I feel like we give them more than we should. But the problems we're facing right now, particularly with commercial development, are not our city ordinances. It's the growth around the HE. You know, if nobody's been over there at Main Street and or 1103 and Cibolo Valley Drive, that place is exploding over there. We have to deal with, you know, there were several really nice big retail projects on the radar for Schertz, and then the Forum came along, and that has just sucked the life out of everything. And about the time they die out, now you got Creekside up north, and they're sucking everything that way. So I really don't think our policies and requirements and regulations are really the problem right now. It's the fact that there's so much going on around us that's already established. I mean, I am just overjoyed to see them moving dirt there at, we call it a Schertz station, whatever that is up around
By
Evo. Okay. And I wish them good luck. You know, hopefully they know what they're doing, because there's still so much left open there in around Santikos. But anyway, if you all don't mind, Roderick's been sitting over here patiently waiting.
My question surrounded, if R5 is recommended and approved, how long do you think it would take before it's part of the change, I should say, and available?
So are you asking when will it be adopted and available
Right.
for people to use?
Mm-hmm.
So, so if everything goes to plan as is, it'll be adopted October 22nd. That's best case scenario.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's 2 meetings for city council.
And if someone had an approved project already in the city and wanted to move to that or request that change, they could do so?
They would have to request the zone change and go through like the whole process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
It would just be a new option for them to pick.
Right,
basically.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
All right.
Can you put the slide up with the GIS map you put up?
This one?
Yeah. So what do those represent again?
So for the smaller developments, the one that are under an acre and a quarter acre or more. So between a quarter acre and an acre, these are all the parcels that are currently between that size. So hypothetically speaking, an owner of a parcel, for instance, let's say right here, could go out, if R5 was available, request R5 and put 8 units there or something.
I'm just trying to visualize what something like that would look like with these quarter acre multifamilies popping up all over the city. I'm trying to imagine what that would look like.
Like this?
I mean, I see that, but in the overall scheme of things,
Have you been down off Pat Booker? It's not aviation, it's one of those, it might be Bird Avenue. If you turn left, you'll see on the right-hand side rows of build-to-rent, like townhomes, and on the left, you'll see some residentials mixed with like a fourplex. It doesn't look out of the ordinary, but I encourage you to kind of drive down there and see that. You see 3 or 4 different types of, or 3 different types of housings right there.
that doesn't help.
They were built
doesn't
probably in the 70s or 80s, so they've been around. Not the new ones. The new the build to rents are new. I don't even know if that community's open yet.
If you look, Brook City Base has one where it's military housing, but it's just, I mean, a lot of these also look like single-family houses. They're just smaller.
I'm trying to visualize how this looks, how it's going to look if a bunch of these quarter acre developments pop up next to and adjacent to some of the long-established residential neighborhoods in the city.
Right.
I don't think it's going to be received too well.
Well, the intent was, would we rather a fourplex pop up or 200 units all at once pop up?
Well, you can't put 200 units on a quarter acre.
True.
So
Well, a developer might try.
if I own an acre on one of these thoroughfares, I could put a whole bunch of multifamilies there. And I just think we're going to get, it's not going to help the argument amongst the population. That's all I'm saying.
Well, real quick, I just took a good look at the map, and if you look down here at the one you've got up there, down there in that lower left corner where that whole group of, right there?
Yep.
It's Deer Haven.
Yes, it is.
There are houses built on, those aren't vacant lots. Those are houses, there are houses built on them. So, yeah. So I think what GIS was, what the intent was to show us where these size lots are throughout the city, but so many of them have already got something built on them.
Well, on Deer Haven, I can have a fire and my house burns down, and then I can come in for a zoning change and put in an apartment complex. So how would that fit?
I'll be absent for that meeting, so.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, it's not going to help anything.
If the zoning, again, it comes back to, they would have to come in and request R5 zoning.
And it's not a guarantee they would get it.
Exactly.
No.
So, again, when you look at the criteria that we just went through for zoning requests, and yeah.
I just think it's so important that we be intentional about what we want the city to ultimately look like, feel like, be like, and be able to communicate that somehow to not just the citizens of Schertz, but also to developers that come here and want to become part of this community, right? Whether they live in it or not. If they're gonna build something here, they're gonna become part of the community in some way. And I just think that, for me, I think it's important to, one, be intentional, and then for us to understand how we help to manage and navigate that. That's it.
Well, again, I will jump in here and say that vision is called the Comprehensive Land Use Plan. And it used to, again, my personal opinion, it used to reflect the way we wanted, the citizens wanted the city to look like. And I'm not sure the new one does. But that's the intent of that plan, is for the, you know, to lay out there for the developers, this is what we want our city to look like, correct?
Correct.
So,
So maybe we look at it right, because what's troubling is when, you know, we have citizens come in and anything that's different than either what they had or what they're used to comes with it a lot of negative connotations that quite honestly are unfounded.
Right.
Right? So I just think that the intentionality will help, you know, mitigate some of that, or at least open a dialogue so we can have a real conversation about the what and the whys. So,
I mean, I'll just lay it out there on the table. What I see coming, if you pass R5, that's the Northcliffe project, okay? I mean, it's right there hitting me between the eyes. That's
Yeah.
exactly what they want to do up there. So,
And
is that necessarily bad?
I mean, I'll point out that one of the citizens' main concern was that what they were trying to do was too dense, too many units, and it was 198 units on, so.
No, and I don't mean that negatively, Sam. I'm just saying that, you know, we're talking up here and we're looking at all these purple squares and we're concerned about these things popping up all over the city, and no, it's not going to happen. It's going to be used where they've, you know, yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
So, I think we're just down in the weeds, getting wrapped around the axle about what may happen, okay, rather than do we like what staff has put out there or not? So, and as Mr. James has said many times, if we change it and we don't like it and it doesn't work, we'll change it again.
Right.
So.
Sure.
All right. Anybody, and I don't mean to shut everybody down, but I think we've kind of strayed off the path here. But I will say I do like, one of the positive things I think is with the R4 is where you're restricting them to those two particular kinds of thoroughfares, because I can think of at least two projects that have been disapproved that would not even, that don't meet that criteria to begin with. And so in that case, I think it's a good thing. And, you know, you talk about 50-foot buildings on 3009. Well, think about 3009. Where could you build a 50-foot tall apartment building? Down here on this end, that's it, okay?
And I'll just,
And so that's 10 feet taller than the one that's across the street from it.
and
Okay?
I'll mention that the general business height maximum is 120 feet too. The general business district, so. I don't know exactly, but they're several stories tall. Yeah.
I will tell you the Hampton Inn and Suites and the Fairfield Inn were tall enough to require standpipes. And when the Hampton was built, that was a knockdown, drag-out fight between the fire marshal and the developer. So it's 40, so that's probably about 45 feet, I think. Is it the Fairfield? I always forget the name of the other one. That one's 5 stories, okay? And, yeah. So that one's probably pushing 60, 65 feet.
Yeah.
We weren't even gonna let the Methodist Church put a spire on top of their steeple, so, yeah. All right, I didn't need to drag that out there, but, those things, I'm sorry, they just pop into my head. And then I can't control myself. All right. Anybody else? Do we want to beat this thing up anymore? Yeah. All right. So once again, make a recommendation to City Council to approve, deny, approve with conditions.
I make a recommendation to approve PL UDC 20240186 as submitted.
Second. For Ms.
Got
Goldick.
got a team going on down there tonight, huh? Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Wallace, a second from Commissioner Goldick to recommend approval of PL UDC 2024-0186. Any further discussion? Please record your votes. I have 6 votes. You publish that, please. I have 5 in favor, 1 opposed. That motion passes. Thank you, Sam. All right, moving on. Item 6A, request by commissioners to place items on a future planning and zoning agenda. Mr. Wallace.
I would like to ask staff to look into if lighter retail uses would be appropriate in R5 or any other residential districts,
Okay.
just to kind of lump them all.
Need any clarification on that? You got it? Okay. Anybody else?
Can I add to that? Because I think that actually might solve the Northcliffe problem too, if you have shops. Like, I don't know, never mind.
Okay.
Just throwing it out there.
Anything else? Announcements? Commissioners, you have anything? Anybody want to know? Staff, you have any? Oh, okay, goody.
Okay, so I have kind of 2 announcements. You may have noticed some staff changes here. So the first one is I get the pleasure of introducing our new planner, William Willingham. He joined us last week, was his first week. He has a bachelor's and master's from Texas A&M. And you may recognize him from back in 2022. He actually did an internship with planning and community development. Loved working for the city so much, decided to come on back and be a planner with us. So we're very excited to have William. Do you want to say something?
Howdy, Commission.
Hello. Welcome.
Thank y'all for having me back.
Okay.
They hired me back. I enjoyed being here. I guess I didn't do enough damage when I was here, so they allowed me to come back. But I'm excited to be here, so looking forward to working with you guys.
All right, well, good to see you.
And then the other thing you may have noticed is Tiffany. So Tiffany accepted a position with SCUC ISD in their HR department. So Tiffany is no longer with the city. So if you have anything that you would normally communicate or ask Tiffany about, email planning@schertz.com, or you can reach out directly to me while we look for a new admin. But we're all really excited for it. It's a great opportunity.
All right. All right, included in your agenda packet is item number 7, information available in the Planning and Zoning Commission packets about current projects and their city council status update. Of course, that won't reflect anything that transpired last night. So, okay. Mr. Walsh, you have? All righty, okay. All right. Well, it is now 8:43 and this meeting is adjourned.
Tiffany's not going to APA.
But 4 of us will be, so
Okay.
we'll be there. Not super well known, but she was